All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Anna, and I am the content manager here at Fiscal Note, and that includes Word Voice. And let's go ahead and get started. I'll start by sharing my screen so that you can see our lovely presentation. So I already introduced myself. I am Anna, and I am so excited to have Brian join us. Brian has a long history of being a prominent voice in terms of advocacy and AI. He has worked with Fortune 500 companies, national nonprofits. We are very lucky to have him today. Welcome, Brian. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you. Such a pleasure to be here and get to talk with everybody.
Yeah, well, I'm going to turn it over to you to tell folks a little bit more about yourself, and then I'll let you go ahead and dive in.
Fantastic. All right, this will be quick. I know this is not why you're tuning in today, but just a quick 30 seconds about myself, Rubenstein Impact Group. So we work with companies and national nonprofit organizations, helping them drive more actions and in their advocacy campaigns, and really doing it one of three ways. We do a lot of work with email campaigns and driving far more actions through your email campaigns. I'm a big believer in emotionally driven content and narrative storytelling. So we do a lot in the email space. We also work with organizations to help them develop their structured advocacy programs. So think about your highly engaged volunteers, your ambassador programs, champions programs, helping launch those types of programs or bolster those. And then lastly, from a strategy perspective, helping organizations and companies develop short and long-term grassroots strategies overall. So, all right, but enough about me. What I'm really excited to tell you about is this research that I just conducted in November and December that we're going to dive into for about 10, 12 minutes here. So I spoke to 21 organizations. And so I should say, right, so this is not a scientific study. This is not going to be in a peer-reviewed journal, but there's a lot of really great insights that I'm excited to share. So I spoke to 21 organizations of all sizes. So anywhere from $4 million in annual revenue to $700 million in annual revenue. So very big to not very small, but sort of medium size. And some were member organizations, some volunteer organizations across several different issue types, different verticals. And the best thing was I had the chance to meet both with grassroots staff and government relations staff to get a lot of different perspectives on how organizations are using AI. So there are four key takeaways I'm going to share today. There was a whole lot more that I learned, but I'm going to start with, we're going to address these four during these next few minutes here. So this first takeaway is that larger organizations can be more restrictive than smaller ones. Now, when I concluded that, I wasn't sure, should I be surprised or was this obvious? So I came for many years, I led digital at the American Cancer Society, Cancer Action Network. So I'm very familiar with how large organizations work. I've worked with organizations of all sizes as a consultant as well. And so what we found, and what I found through these conversations, especially these large organizations, is that AI policies are being driven by IT and legal counsel, not necessarily by the people who are using AI for their day-to-day work. And again, might not surprise you. Also, I don't think what would surprise you is that advocacy is not always at the table in those conversations. We see this a lot when a big organization especially introduces a new technology. Their focus is very much on income development and fundraising, not so much on everything else. Advocacy can be an afterthought. So what do advocacy people do? They do what we always do. They look for workarounds and unofficial workarounds to the rules, which I'm not going to advocate for. I try to get along with my legal counsel and IT friends, but it's not stopping us from using it. And as I talked to these organizations, what I realized is that they all really fell into one of four categories, sort of four AI cultures. And I'm going to spend just a minute on each one. I promise this isn't some deep philosophical conversation, but as importantly as telling you about that culture, also what opportunities it provides for you and what actions you should take. So let's start with this procrastinators culture. This is one where sort of that mentality is, oh yeah, this AI thing, we should talk about this at some point. It looks like this isn't going away. And for you as an advocacy staff person in a procrastinator culture, there's some great opportunities. This organization is looking for people to step up and be the innovator. to raise the visibility about how we can be using AI to increase our capacity without adding staff, to improve the quality of our work. And so those opportunities are available for you to raise your visibility with leadership and make sure that when they do get around to creating an AI policy, which they eventually will, that advocacy has a seat at that table. And so how should you do that? One, sign up and start using an AI platform if you're not already. So if you can expense that $20 a month, that's great. If you can't, I still strongly encourage you. There are definitely some benefits to using the paid version of the platform versus the free version. So try to, whatever platform you like best. It can be Anthropic Claude, it can be ChatGPT, Google Gemini, whichever you feel that you're most comfortable with. But sign on to that sort of that lowest level paid and start using it for your job related tasks. And we can do a whole separate webinar on how organizations are using AI and all the different things you can do as it pertains to advocacy, but different conversation for a different day. But as you're doing it, make sure that you're sharing those successes with your leadership team. Make sure they're seeing that this is an important technology for AI and something that we should be using. And then, be ready to step up. When they're ready to start making rules, be there to represent advocacy.
Hey, Brian, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, please.
I think one of a common theme that we'll find is we should be exploring using an AI platform on our own. You talk about encouraging us to sign up. What are the benefits of signing up for a platform versus using the free version?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I'll sort of just hit two in particular or three that are really important. One is it's going to remember all of the things you're doing in the platform. So you're constantly building on top of what you've done in the past. That's number one. Number two is you're going to get a smarter version of that AI. It's going to be faster. It's going to be able to process better, think better, give you better results. And number three, for most of those platforms, you're going to get more security protections. A platform like Claude defaults you into the information you put in there being what they consider secure. Versus ChatGPT, you've got to opt in with the paid version. I don't think there's any privacy with the free version. And then when it comes to Google Gemini, it's Google. You never really know if anything's private there or not. So definitely some benefits. That's a great question.
Thanks. I just, in case I was burning on everyone's mind, because it might come up again. So just wanted to get that out of the way.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, so let's go to our next culture, our next AI culture. These are the gatekeepers, where basically the mantra is you are not authorized to use AI for that purpose. This is definitely prevalent in several big organizations I talk to, but also in a few small organizations where maybe the leadership or the CEO just doesn't buy into AI. It's a little techno scared, and they just says, no, you can't use it. But again, more so in the bigger organizations, even in this sort of authoritarian AI regime, there are still opportunities there for you. One is to be educating those gatekeepers about why it is beneficial for advocacy staff to be using AI, to share examples from your counterparts in other organizations. So again, those gatekeepers can see, yeah, maybe this is valuable. And again, to ensure that fundraising isn't the only focus, which happens so often, as I mentioned before. So making sure that they're seeing, okay, they need to begin looking beyond fundraising to the other parts of the organization. So what can you do? Again, I'm not going to tell you to circumvent the rules. Yeah, we all have our workarounds, but importantly, create a personal AI account. And what I would suggest doing is take the content you're using for work, change the name of the organization, change the issue you're talking about, maybe make a few other minor edits, and use that dummy content in your personal AI platform. And ask it to do some of those work functions you would if you were allowed to. And then take what you're learning, demonstrate those efficiencies and those benefits to your leadership team to try to loosen those reins a little bit. So, all right, so what's the opposite of those gatekeepers is the Wild West, where your leadership team is like, oh, AI is great, go for it, use it however you want. And on the surface, this seems like the best place to work, right? You could do whatever you want, however you want to do it. However, there are some areas here we need to be careful. But first, the opportunities here, are obvious. One is they're looking for someone to take on a leadership role for AI. So be that person who's at the table talking to them about how advocacy is using it and why it's so great, and regularly showing those benefits. And when it comes to what you should be doing, if you live in a Wild West culture, use AI. Don't let this go to waste, this opportunity. But, or and, we're supposed to say and, right? Not but. And very importantly, use it responsibly. Kind of like that thing when you're a kid, right? It only takes one person to mess it up for everybody. So don't be that person who uploaded all this proprietary or private information, and all of a sudden your Wild West culture becomes a gatekeeper culture. So use it responsibly, understand the privacy policy that platform has, and be regularly sharing your learnings with leadership. Because at some point, they're going to realize they got to have a policy. And you want to make sure when they get to that point, they already realize that it's essential that AI have really strong and open use of an AI platform. And finally, our innovators culture, where sort of that mindset is, this could be great for the organization. Let's figure this out together. And together is really the key word there. This really is the best type of environment, the best type of culture to be in. The Wild West is fun, but from a strategic perspective, innovators are really where you want to be. And the opportunity here is to be involved early. Again, let's make sure that advocacy gets a seat at the table from the get-go. We're not an afterthought. And you want to be regularly raising the needs and use cases for why your team should be using AI, how it's going to benefit not just your team, but the organization, help you achieve your mission. So again, what should you do? Anna sort of teased it. It's a regular. Sign up for that $20 a month AI platform so you get that better level of service. Use it responsibly and document the things you're doing. An innovator culture is going to want proof. They're not going to just believe you because you said it. They're going to want to see proof and bring that to the table. So document the things you're doing, document the successes you're having, and be sure you are proactively sharing that with leadership. Don't wait for someone to come ask you, oh, how is advocacy using it? Because they might not ask and you might get left behind. So be proactive in doing that. So there's a lot more. I've been working with Fiscal Note. There'll be a blog post coming out that dives into each of these cultures in a little bit more detail. So keep an eye out for that. It'll be on their LinkedIn page, be on my LinkedIn page as well. But it was definitely interesting to see what these different cultures are. And so, Anna, you're going to throw a poll question up there?
I sure am. I'm really curious to hear from the audience. What AI culture best describes your organization? Oh, wow. Here we go. So, wow, wow, wow. Okay, we're going to give it a couple of seconds here.
I'm rooting for y'all to not be in that gatekeeper culture, that you've got some more opportunity in that.
Okay, so let's go ahead and share the results here. Can you see what I'm seeing? It looks like we have
It's pretty even
procrastinators.
out there.
It's 26%, gatekeepers at 19%, the Wild West 26%, and ring a ding ding, the winners are innovators at 30%. So I'm really, really glad to hear that we've got innovator culture in the lead.
Fantastic. All right, so let me just throw out a few other takeaways that I think you're going to find interesting and insightful, and then we're going to dive into all this more deeply in a conversation with Anna, and then, of course, taking your questions as well. So something I found in a lot of organizations that are saying, oh, yeah, we should start using AI, they're defaulting to Microsoft Copilot. And the reason they're doing this is it makes sense, right? They might already be a Microsoft organization. They have that enterprise account set up to use. Copilot doesn't cost them any more money. The challenge is of the major players out there for advocacy use cases, Copilot is really an inferior tool. I hate to say that. I'm sorry if you're a Microsoft person, but it's just far behind both in independent testing that I read about, but also in a test that I ran myself. So I did for a client of mine, of course, with their full permission. I ran a test between Microsoft Copilot and using Anthropic Claude. I'm a huge Claude fan. I'll just put that out there right away. And I asked it to analyze all of the emails we sent to volunteers in the last year. So I uploaded all that content. I also uploaded the email performance data for those emails. So the AI could see, all right, here was the content, and here's how volunteers responded to it or members responded to it. And I asked AI to do two things. I said, one, I want you to analyze these emails and assess what are the emotions that we leveraged in these messages. And then compare that against the data to let me know which emotions were most effective for different types of asks, for different types of campaigns. So when I used Claude, it was fabulous. I knew what the emotions were in these emails because I had written them for the client. It completely nailed it, identified the right emotions, drew the right parallels with the campaigns, with the data. It was great. Copilot really completely whiffed. It was not able to pick out the right emotions. It sort of just selected two and applied that to all of the emails. So it was really disappointing. There's some other data out there about it, but unfortunately, it just doesn't quite do the job that we need. So what should you be doing to help accommodate this if you're in this sort of situation in your organization? Again, run these tests, try out a different AI platform, compare the two, and if you're seeing that Copilot's not meeting your needs, share that with your leadership team. All right, third takeaway. And this one I love because I love sharing information about using AI for advocacy, is that there is just a monstrous opportunity for people to learn from each other as far as how you're using AI. So I talked to about, like I said, 21 organizations. I heard over 30 different use cases. And when I started, I expected to hear a lot of overlap when I talked to folks. I expected really to hear the same two or three things with maybe a wild card out there. And actually, that was not the case at all. What I found was, yeah, pretty much everyone's using it to edit some form of written content. But beyond that, their sort of second and third use are all completely different and really vary. And so what that means is you should really be talking to your counterparts at other organizations. Ask them how they're using AI for their advocacy work. You're probably going to pick up a lot of really great tips around that. Unfortunately, there aren't a lot of great public forums. Yeah, there's plenty of writing out there about AI and AI uses, but not so much for advocacy. So if you find a public forum that is putting out good content, bookmark that thing, keep going to it. Fiscal Note, obviously, their blog puts out posts around using AI as a great resource. I'll say my LinkedIn page, I try to post every few weeks or even more often about how you can be using AI effectively for your advocacy and grassroots work. But really keep an eye out because it's going to be a little harder than you'd like it to be, but there are some really great use cases that you'll be able to learn from and integrate into your program.
I think just a comment, Brian, I think that's the smartest thing is there actually can be a lot of noise from a lot of experts out there. It's hard to know to trust. I find that talking to my peers and my counterparts is the most reliable way to learn how to use AI because someone literally is doing it that's kind of matched at my skill level, does the same kind of day to day. They know exactly my situation. So I think that's really, really good advice.
Fantastic. All right, last takeaway. Clearly, I'm an AI evangelist, an AI enthusiast. So I thought I should at least close with, all right, there are some serious concerns out there that we do need to be aware of and do need to be careful about. And it was actually really interesting hearing from the organizations what some of those concerns that they had. So one, which I think is the obvious one, is protected data, right? If you have truly proprietary data, you don't want to be uploading that to AI, regardless of what it says its security policy is. Same thing with volunteer data, health data. Obviously, volunteer health data should never go into there. The second thing, though, was really interesting, the note-taking apps. I love note-taking apps. I use Fathom. Check that out if you're looking for a good free note-taking app. They also have a paid version, which is even better. But there's several organizations that actually forbid their staff from using note-taking apps. And it really came down to one of two reasons. The first is they were concerned about a leak. If there's a transcript of every internal conversation that happens, they don't want that getting out. So a type of staff leak, even if it's just accidental, it's too easy to get out there. So they were concerned about public exposure of their internal conversations. The second one, which I thought was really interesting and makes total sense, if you are an organization that lives in sort of a litigious type world, if a subpoena is a regular part of your daily life, all that AI note taking, those transcripts, those videos, those are all going to be discoverable in a court case. So if you live in that litigious world, then yeah, you also don't want to use note taking for those same reasons. When it comes to policy analysis, it's kind of funny, and I know Fiscal Note's working hard on this as well with their policy note system, as are a lot of the platforms out there. Everybody wants to trust AI to scan the landscape of what, especially if you oversee a lot of different states and state legislative work. Tell us what's happening at the state legislative level. Compare different bills that are happening. Let me, alert me if something's going on. And a lot of people are using AI to keep an eye out and to help monitor state legislation. But no one's quite ready to completely trust it yet. They're using AI as sort of that first line of effort, but then they're still going back to those primary sources to check it out for themselves. And that'll continue to get better over time. Then the last thing that we hear about, certainly in the mainstream, is, oh, AI is going to come take my job. And I think most people agree that I talk to is, and I have not heard, and nobody I talk to has heard of actually AI taking an advocacy related job, because so much of our job is relationships, which is great. That AI isn't going to take an advocacy job necessarily, but they're not going to take your job. But a person who does advocacy, who knows how to use AI, could take your job if you don't. So your real threat is to not know how to use these great tools, because someone's going to come along who does, and they're going to sort of demonstrate to your leadership about all the things that they're missing. So strongly encourage you, if you're not already, now's the time, dip your toe in, jump into the pool, and start trying to figure out how you can use AI for your day-to-day advocacy work. And that is it. There's certainly a ton more I learned through this research, but we will stop there and do a little Q&A.
Yeah. So audience members, feel free to take a couple of minutes to generate some questions and populate them in the Q&A section. But I actually have some questions teed up that I really wanted to ask. So I'll get started. Brian, can you tell me about some of the more innovative AI use cases that you came across in your research?
Absolutely. For me, this was the most exciting part. I'd love to hear how people are using it in ways I might not have thought of. Like I said, most people are using it for editing and some writing. But I talked to some folks who are using it to create podcast scripts if they've got a podcast, either personally or organizationally. So it's helping them create scripts for that podcast. They're using it to write tough one-to-one messages. If you've got a problem volunteer or a problem member that you've got to deal with, how to make sure you're using the right tone. And a lot of different ways that you can do that by uploading previous conversations and such. And then something else I saw that I loved was people are taking the same copy and having AI write it for different audiences. So maybe one version for your larger list, another version for your ambassadors, another version for your board. So instead of them having to rewrite the same content in 5 different formats, they're writing it once and letting AI create all those different versions for them.
Yeah, that's great. I think this is a good one. Some of us in the audience here might be relatively new to AI. And so what 3 things would you recommend that we do immediately next week as AI newbies?
All right, forget next week. Let's talk about tonight. What I want you to do when you get home this evening, or maybe you're already at home, open your refrigerator, type in the things you got in there in the chat GPT and ask it to give you a recipe for dinner. Simple, non-invasive. You're going to be amazed by some of the things that you see. I actually did this. I had some family in town, had this great piece of fish. I bought at this fish market. I'd never made this fish before. I said, all right, I've got these things. What should I do? And they gave me this great recipe and everybody loved it. So that's the first thing. Just get you introduced to using it, to talking to it. Then let's get into work stuff now, which probably is what you're looking for. Take something you wrote at work, put it into AI, and ask it to approve it for you. Now, there's a whole thing. Again, I've done a whole separate webinar about prompting. I've got a blog post and a LinkedIn post on that as well about how to create a great prompt to get the best results you need. But just take something you wrote, say, look, I'm the grassroots manager, the government relations director for this organization. I'm speaking to this audience. I wrote this. Here's the link to my website, our organization's website, so you know how we regularly talk. Improve this writing. So very simple type of thing. You can see how it edits. Keep talking to it back and forth a little bit. You'll see how quickly it improves. Third thing you can do is ask it to generate 3 ideas for a campaign you're working on. So type in a little bit, explain the campaign, the issue, your volunteer members, that you're sort of grassroots, what you're thinking about. I'd say, give me 3 different ideas I can present to volunteers for things that they can do to help us move this legislation forward. and you're going to see it generate some things you probably knew, but maybe an idea or two you hadn't thought about.
I love that. Now let's talk to maybe some other folks in the room who are maybe more advanced. What are some more advanced use cases of AI in advocacy work?
So what I heard through my study and some my research and some things that I did is advanced organizations are now beginning to build agents. So to do some of the work for them. So think about your fly-in. If you plan a fly-in for, let's say, more than 30 people, it might be 50, it might be 200 people. Think about all the questions you get from your attendees about the hotel, about logistics, about travel, about talking points, about the schedule. These questions you answer, even though you give them all this information, you have to answer all these questions again and again. Well, advanced organizations are creating an agent to answer that front line of questions. So you tell the volunteers, you introduce them to the agent and say, all right, if you have a logistics question, start here. If you don't get your answer here, then reach out to me. And what organizations are going to find, and they're starting to find, is they're able to cut down the number of personal one-to-one questions they have to respond to by 60, 70, 80%. Because most of those questions you get are the same ones over and over again.
I'm going to turn now to some of the questions that we have in the chat. Apologies, I forgot to activate the live captioning, so thank you for your patience on that, and thank you for bringing it to my attention. We have one question about the example that you gave between Anthropic versus Copilot. Can you tell us a little bit more about those results? Was it more about a difference between the program or user differences?
That's a great question. So where the trouble was Copilot's inability to read the content and interpret the content properly. So think about an email that you write to your volunteers or your members or social media content or whatever type of content you write. I mentioned earlier, I'm a huge believer in emotionally driven content because our studies show regularly over and over again, it increases action taking, which is what we're always trying to do. And so I know that every email that I write for a client is emotionally driven. It's very specific emotions we're using to get people to feel the way we want them to take the action we want them to. Copilot struggled to identify what those emotions were, whereas Claude would read through, analyze that content, and clearly picked out what the intent was, what we were trying to achieve. And so because then it had the right base information, it was able to provide a better analysis. Did that get to the question? Or if I didn't quite get to it, ask a follow-up question. I'm happy to go into detail.
Someone asked if we can share links out to some of those reports that you mentioned, and in the follow-up email, I'll sync with Brian afterwards to make sure that we get those delivered to you.
And also my LinkedIn page has lots of different posts related to AI, and you're welcome to share any of that. Steal, beg, and borrow, all of that you like.
What can you do with Copilot to combat its inferiority? Do you have any tips on prompts or instructions that could bridge the AI skill gap?
It's a great question. I wish I had an equally great answer for you. I have not used Copilot as much for the obvious reasons. Where Copilot can be good, and things that I've read about, it is highly obviously integrated into the Microsoft tools. So it should be able to help you if you're trying to do more advanced things in Excel. It should be able to help you very quickly and easily with formulas. With those pivot tables, we all sort of struggle to figure out how to create and use. It'll be able to help you create some of those things. If you're a PowerPoint user, a lot of the AI tools out there aren't great at creating PowerPoint slides. They'll give you outlines and give you content, but they can't create the slides themselves. I'd imagine Copilot will do a much better job actually creating the PowerPoint slides that you need. And then in Microsoft Word, it's ever present, whether you want it to be or not. You can sort of see its little slider on the side as you're writing. And so it can be real-time editing versus what I do is I typically write something and then put it into AI for comment. So, Copilot can do that a little bit more real-time for you. Might be a little bit more efficient.
I have used Copilot before, and one thing I can add is it is great. It's kind of like your personal assistant. Because, Brian, you said it's so interconnected, you can say, summarize all my emails for me. Help me find this one email I sent last week. Can you find this presentation for me? So using it as a personal assistant in that way can also be really helpful because it's so interconnected.
Yeah, I'm sure with your calendar and other types of things, there's a
Uh-huh.
lot that it can do. Although Claude's starting to do that too. Claude now has an integration with
Yep.
Microsoft.
Yep.
So,
It's sure. No, exactly. But that is one use case because it's
yeah,
already integrated that, it makes that kind of stuff really easy. Here's a good question. How do we balance concerns about the environmental impact of AI use among staff?
it's a great question. It's one we've heard about. I actually did talk to one organization. They said, we don't use it. They were sort of an environmental type organization. They said, we don't use it. My answer here, I try to figure out how to do this in a politically correct way, is that if you're one organization isn't going to use AI for environmental reasons, you are not going to stop Google and OpenAI and Meta and Microsoft and everybody else from continuing to create. This is the future of technology. And yes, we want to be environmentally conscious as we do it, and we want to raise these environmental concerns, and we want to push back on the companies and organizations that are creating these products to help continue to make the environmental concerns very visible with them. So they're going to be self-conscious. They're going to be conscious about it. That being said, they're not going to stop. This is a technology that is not going to go away. And so what I would say is, let's do this on two fronts. Let's not just say we're not going to use it for minor environmental reasons, because you're going to get left behind, is what's going to happen. And I want to see you get left behind. So many good organizations, so many important missions. So I would say run this on two tracks. On the one hand, raise your environmental concerns, make that visible to those companies that are doing this. But at the same time, use the tools that are out there, because they're going to be there, and they're going to not only allow you to increase your capacity without adding more staff, but they're going to improve the quality of your work.
This is a good question. It's about hallucinations. I've seen AI models provide fictional but convincing outputs when asked to research certain topics. So if I hadn't double checked, I wouldn't have caught the hallucination. What preventative methods are there to prevent AI from hallucinating?
So for one, exactly what you did, which is double check. So it's hard to prevent it from hallucinating. So you always want to double check. But these newer models, these paid models, that $20 a month, they hallucinate less than the free models. And the nice thing is, when you pay for that $20 a month, you're always able to access that latest model for the most part. So number one, that's going to help. The other thing is, think about your prompts. So sometimes, depends what type of research you're doing, but sometimes you can close the loop on what you're allowing it to research. So instead of saying, just find me information about X, Y, or Z, give it the very specific sources you want it to use, and be very direct and say, only use these three sources, use nothing else except these three sources to pull this information together for me. And that will also help reduce, maybe not eliminate, but help reduce those hallucinations. But your instinct, which was to double check any fact that AI puts out there that you don't have documentation of, you're going to want to double check that yourself for still a little while.
You can also, sometimes I just like to ask AI, where did you get that information from? You can check the sources, and like what you were saying. I can also answer from a technology standpoint that at places like Fiscal Note, where we have AI in all of our tools like Voter Voice and Policy Note, because it is intentionally built for specific use cases, we have engineers that are constantly running evaluations to test how often the AI is making hallucinations and putting guardrails to prevent that from happening. So just a quick plug, and that is a benefit of using a purpose-built AI tool, is that you have people that are making sure that it is working the way it's supposed to be working. If you're working with like a chat GPT, for instance, it has to work for everybody. But for instance, at Fiscal Note, it has to work for people who are in advocacy or people who are in policy. So the use cases get a little bit more specific. But all AI companies will do evaluations to check to make sure that the AI is answering to the best of its ability. But technically, yeah. So hopefully that provides a little bit more clarity also. The next question.
Policy Note's a great example of sort of a closed loop system, right? Because
Yeah.
you're pulling, you know that you're pulling from very credible sources.
Yeah.
And yeah, some things might slip in there because look, the sources aren't always 100% right. But a closed loop system like that's going to be more reliable than just sort of a Google Gemini request.
Mm-hmm. That was a great question. Okay, this is a really good one. How do I build an argument to my boss to use or to not use Copilot and to use another tool? Does that work?
Absolutely. So two things you can do. One is ask AI, tell me, all right, here are my use cases. Tell me why you're better than Copilot and let it give you an answer and see what it comes up with. But something you could definitely do as well is run a test. Like I said, I ran a test for that sort of emotion research where I did it in Copilot and in another platform in Claude. And so take something that you're working on, and it's a little bit more work. I get that, but do something with it in Copilot. Do the same thing with it in ChatGPT or Claude, otherwise, and look at the difference and take those differences to your boss. I wouldn't just do it one time. Probably do it a few different use cases to show that, and take those results to your boss, especially if you're in a good innovator culture, where they are going to sort of think about this strategically, and showing them the evidence is going to be the best way for you to get that permission you need.
This one is a little trickier to answer, but I think it's an interesting question nonetheless. Describe a situation where I can set up an agent that proactively monitors something, for example, a bill, an agency, or rulemaking, and then reports back to me.
So I am not a coder.
Yeah, I'm not
I'm a
either.
grassroots and advocacy and communications person who uses technology, but there are tools out there. The key is that the source needs to be open, but I'm sure a good coder, you could probably use something like, you might not have to be even a coder, but someone who just has a little bit of that mentality, using a system like Claude Code or some of the other systems out
Yeah.
there that that you don't actually have to do the coding. You just sort of tell it what you want, and it can generate that code for you and generate those agents for you. So there's a lot of AI platforms out there that will
I
do
can speak.
that. Just do a search for what you want, and some of these systems are free. Some of them, the more advanced ones, are paid, but they'll be able to do that kind of work for you. But again, you also, if you're on this call, you probably have Fiscal Note, Policy Note. They're already doing a lot of this work, and I know they're investing a lot of effort into doing it well.
Yeah, I was going to say it is possible for anyone to do anything with AI, but it still takes time and it still takes some skills. So here are the benefits of using like a policy tracker or an advocacy tool that is purpose built for a specific industry. Is that you don't have to do any of the work. You don't have to verify what sources that it's pulling from. You don't have to run those evaluations to make sure it's not hallucinating. You don't have to constantly make sure that it's scraping every single, because a lot of updates in terms of policy or bills, they can happen minute to minute, hour to hour. You need that information the second it happens. You don't have to make sure that you've got scrapers out there that are logging these changes the second that they happen. You don't have to build code to take that data and process it into a report. Like Brian was saying, AI makes it possible to do all of that, but that's still a lot of work. You can also buy an AI purpose tool that does all of that for you and has people that are doing it for you. So I think, there's an argument there for finding a tool that is designed for your industry.
And I'll tell you, even the government relations directors that I talked to through this research, even those who have created that type of effort or they're using something like Policy Note, they're still going back, especially for state legislative activity. They're still going back and double checking everything to make sure that nothing was missed. Because look, a lot of lives, a lot of livelihoods depend on this information being right. And so most people aren't quite ready to trust AI yet. So play around with something like that
Yeah.
or use a policy note. But the people I talk to, they're still going back to those state sites and other types of resources to make sure it's all right, that they're not missing anything.
Right. Right. And exactly. And then this is a good one. How we'll make this the last one. We'll see how we have time. This will be the second to last or last one. How do you adjust prompts to ensure content doesn't read so obviously like AI? Um, of course, it should be read through and edited, but there are classic tells that it was written by AI that takes a lot of time to correct.
Yeah, so I've got something I did. It's the 6 steps to a great prompt. And if you reach out to me, my email will be on the next slide. I'm happy to send you my sort of one pager on that. But the key is, do not, what they sort of used to call in the media industry, where rip and read, where you just sort of rip something off the telex machine and read it on there. You need to make sure that you are involved in the writing, even when you're using AI. So, like I said, I like to write something and then let AI improve upon it. Sometimes if I want AI to write something, I'm still going back and editing it. And even AI, as much as it's improved and as well as it's doing, it's still only going to get you 70 to 80% of the way there. So there's always, which is a good thing, there's always going to be a human role for in using AI when it comes to advocacy work. So the key to make sure it doesn't sound like AI, but it sounds like you, is to make sure you're truly involved in writing. Something I love to do for my clients is I take all of the content that we've written and I upload that to the AI. So it sees the writing style. And I tell it I want it to write in this style, in this tone, using this format. I also pull a lot of information from their website. I copy and paste it in sort of my AI project for that client. So it understands how the organization likes to talk about itself. This is the benefit of that $20 a month model. You can upload all this into there and then it will write. You're asking it to write to your style rather than just sort of giving it carte blanche to write however it wants to. So uploading that content is probably the best thing and the easiest thing you can do to make sure that it sounds like you and not like AI. And then a whole separate conversation can be had about this M-dash debate. We won't go down that rabbit hole.
Um, yeah, that's a good one. A couple of people commented, beware of the hyphen, beware of the dash.
There are some really big M-dash proponents that are very upset that every time they write something, someone thinks AI did it because there's an M-dash in there. So you can still use M-dashes if you're doing great writing.
And then this one I'll answer real quick because someone is asking about the AI features of voter voice. So I'd be happy to tell you that we have AI that helps you with campaign creation, email optimization, and reporting. So things like real-time copy optimization for campaign emails will help flag words or phrases likely to trigger a spam filter. Uses open and click rate best practices and performance data to recommend what you might want to change before you hit send. But you can learn more. Actually, let me pull up my next slide. We can get right back to it. So after our great Q&A, I want to thank Brian so much for his time today. I certainly have learned a lot. I think the 4 cultures was most interesting to me, and thinking about what the opportunities are. There's an opportunity in every culture. That was a real positive for me in hearing in your presentation and your research. If you guys wouldn't mind, after this webinar ends, you'll be prompted to take a survey. It's just 2 questions. One is just to tell us how we're doing in this webinar, and the other is if you want a follow-up call from Brian, just opt in with your email. I'll pass that along to him, and he'll be able to reach out to you. And then to learn more about Voter Voice, go to info.votervoice.net, where you can learn more about our digital advocacy platform. I hope that you guys enjoyed today's session. Brian, thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks so much for the opportunity. It was great. I love the questions. A lot of really great questions out there.
I
That was
thought
a
so
lot of fun.
too. We've got a smart bunch. Again, everyone have a wonderful rest of your afternoon, and we'll see you for our next webinar. Thanks, everyone.